Okay, let's see. And there we are. And this is completely not where it needs to be. This is what happens when you set up in a hurry. Not even close. Oh, I know why. There we go. Thing needs another 3 panels on it. Oh, sorry to hear that, Bill. Well, at least you got to come in and say hi. Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, Glue Troopers, all the ships at sea, and Miss Calabash, wherever you are. Okay, guys. Well, we just got all kinds of stuff going on. I've been gone a while, obviously working the weekends, and finally getting a Saturday off. Don't know how next month's schedule is going to be yet. But I know some folks already told me that they weren't going to be able to adjust to the new time. And some are, which is, hey, it's not a military formation. Come and go at your leisure. It's all in good fun. I guess I can get rid of some of these things up here. Let's see. I don't need that message since it's already begun. We had a couple of, so you can tell I didn't get a chance to clean any of this crap up. I was actually out in the Tarbus working on the Mace, chatting with somebody on the phone, and completely lost track of time. And looked at me, yikes, ran here, and I'd had a few things put together already, and some stuff showed up at the very last second, particularly on the Dragula. So a lot of you guys, of course, are familiar with the cars, the Barris cars and everything, and the Dean Jeffries cars from Hollywood, and of course the models that are associated with them. And I imagine a lot of you guys have built a lot of that stuff. Well, Dragula is a particularly interesting case because some information came my way on it recently. Of course, there have been a lot of... I didn't get a glass either. Drinking out of the bottle tonight. I didn't get a... oh, yeah, I did get a glass. Told you. Just rush. Lowest production values on the internet, and I'm proud of it. And just a little Mio tea. No bourbon tonight because I have to go to work tomorrow evening. Okay, so the blood plop plop fizz fizz. Imagine this crowd probably catches that reference. So we all know that there were, and I'm probably going to get a lot of this wrong. A bunch of information came my way. I've not had time to digest it and collate it. I should have taken some notes. But hey, Bruce, glad you could make it. And yes, I have slowed down. In fact, we're going to be showing you some of my work on the Mace. It's looking a lot nicer. I was just out weathering it a little bit earlier, and so the Dragula car, which Al Lewis, who from the Munsters played Grandpa, the Vampire. That car, of course, was made famous in the show, and then Fred Gwynne had to drive it in the movie. Well, of course, there's been a lot of copies made of it. Well, there was one particular copy made, which I used a picture of recently, that was considered the most authentic copy made, but it turns out that it's actually partly the original car because a lot of the original parts were sent. Now, I'm going to, hey guys, I'm going to get the information, and at some point down the road with the other 9 projects I have going on, I'm going to get the information and do a video on Dragula and try to get the details as straight as I can, because as is often the case with these kinds of cars, it gets a little it gets a little confusing. And it doesn't help that one of the famous car making company owners, and I think we all know who I'm talking about, who made a lot of the Hollywood cars, was not exactly well known for sharing credit. So that kind of hit a lot of people's work. Well, a lot of work done by guys like Dick Dean and Dean Jeffries and others was absorbed by higher authority that wanted the shine. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is with Dragula, when they made the TV show, of course, Al Lewis posed in the car and everything, but when they made the movie, the thing was too small. Fred Gwynne couldn't fit in a cockpit that Al Lewis could fit into. I believe they had to lengthen the coffin. They had to make a lot of changes. They had to change the shape of the bubble, which I believe was flat on back in the original. And in fact, I believe, I think I skipped wrong ones. Okay, why didn't that even come up? There's Al. There's a story. This is taken shortly before he passed. Okay, there's Dragula, and there's Al Lewis with the TV version, and then of course there's what people call the second one, which apparently is kind of a second one, partly a rebuild because it had a lot of the original parts. Not the picture I wanted, not the picture I wanted, and apparently I didn't download as many images as I thought. Anyway, so there's a very complex and interesting history to this. Now, there have been a lot of copies made. Some are more authentic than others. I believe the original coffin cast is still around. But you have to remember, to the studio, a lot of times when these cars, once they're done shooting the show or whatever, they're parts to be reused. How many props got repurposed or something we'll be talking about later. Yeah, Fred was 6'5", and Al Lewis, I think, was under 6 feet. And if any of you guys have seen Car 54, Where Are You, which had Fred Gwynn when he's not in makeup, you realize he was a very long, slender drink of water. And the story with Barris and everything is pretty involved. But let me go grab the picture real quick. When Al was literally, this is him, and towards the end of his life, he was hospitalized, and or he couldn't get out of bed, but he wanted to sit in the car one more time. So through a very long story that I cannot remember the details on, I will try to get them and do a video on it later. They did bring the car to him. Unfortunately, he was too weak to get out of bed. So let me see if I can find that picture real quick. Let's see. I'm not sure if this is the exact one, but apparently they did bring the car to him. And but unfortunately, like I say, he wasn't able to get out of bed. He wanted to sit in the car one more time. Now, this apparently is the most authentic reproduction, and it does have a lot of the original parts. So if I understand correctly, some people say it's almost more of a rebuild of the original. So some people consider it the original, but I'm going to have to get all the details on that. There was explained to me, but like, again, I failed to take any notes there. I knew the minute I said Car 54 Soiree, somebody was going to put some of the lyrics of the Khrushchev's Do It Idlewild. But it was a beautiful gesture anyway. And when Al did pass away, the car actually did make an appearance. It was there at his funeral, and I've really got to get better organized. Okay, there it is. And this is the car outside the church. And a lot of you guys, some of you guys, I was surprised how many people knew this. I didn't, and I'm a trivia nutter. If I did, I forgot. But believe it or not, Al Lewis was a huge basketball guy, and he'd actually been a basketball scout at early part in his life. And they were like a couple of people who knew him or had seen him on television that bumped into him. And if they got talking basketball, I mean, he was happy to sit down, and apparently quite the authority on it too. And that was I've never built the model of Dragula, which was repopped as recently, I think, as I want to say 2016 or 2012. So it's been within the last 10 years, so you can get some fairly updated models of it. But I will be putting together a video as more information comes. The information came my way as I actually get back with my source and write it down. The real Car 54 is actually painted red. Well, I guess in black and white movies. I forget which movie it was. Somebody was just telling me the blood had to be orange because the way they treated the film, it was the only way to get to look red on screen. I imagine it happened on more than one movie, but anyway. But I know a lot of folks out there are movie car fans, and I just thought they might enjoy that. A little bit of trivia about Al and the Dragula, and like I said, once I get the information together, I'll put a more coherent story out. But and yeah, the funny thing about black and white, black and white, it's nice to see the images, but it's not much of a resource because you really never know what. Yes, Ed was in Car 54, and with a, I hate to say it, but with a face like that, I would have said all he could do is comedy. But if you guys remember my cousin Vinny, he did a great job as the old Southern Judge, which I believe was his last role. And Mr. Gambini. And being from the deep South, I mean, I have seen, he nailed that character. And I have seen judges that are lawyers and the like, part of the legal class of the South, that were just like, even talk like that. And of course, that's what they call them, actors. You can play a New York police officer from the Bronx, or a Southern judge. Just like Carroll O'Connor could play Archie Bunker, or he could turn around and play Chief Gillespie. And with both with equal aplomb. The two Utes. The two what? The two Utes. My favorite line in that movie, though, is when you got Marissa Tomei, he wants to use her. He says, "Your Honor, I'd like to treat this as a hostile visit." "Oh, you think I'm hostile now?" Oh, man, he brought the world a lot of laughs. He's one of those people, I think, that left the world a better place than he and Al Lewis both left the world a better place than they found it. What's a Ute? It's the way someone from the Bronx would say a youth. He's talking about two young men, two youths, but with that deep, city accent. The two Utes. And of course, the Southern judge is like, the two what? And as many of you know, people who have very thick local dialects in the U.S. can be impossible for people from other parts of our own country to understand. And again, I had to work as an interpreter when I was in the Army because my English was clean enough, but I was from the Deep South, so I spoke country and Western, and could help, translate for the other folks from north of the Mason-Dixon line. But anyway, so I thought I would show you guys real quick what is going on with the mace. The decal, the black decal down the side broke, but I decided instead of, I had some black decal that I could have put on it to replace it, but I thought, you know what, I'd rather weather it a little bit, and judging the photos I saw, the paint schemes were never quite perfect on these things. I almost left the big mace off the nose, but I thought, well, it adds a little, makes it pop a little bit. And the kit, I really, especially given this thing was made, Renoir really did pay a lot of attention to detail. The doors open, the wheels roll, the bogies move up and down, the transporter erects and declines, although of course you got to be very careful doing it. But you can see a little bit there where I weathered it some, and what I saw is they all had faded streaks. Which is just classic of aircraft that are parked out in the weather and stuff. And I didn't want to overdo it. It's really easy to over-weather a model because it's so much fun to weather stuff. And now some of these photos that you see were before I put any weathering on. Let me see if I can find that picture where I weathered it. I just put my hand there so you can see how big this thing is. I have no idea where I'm going to put it. Let me find that picture real quick. And I don't know how well it'll show the weathering, but let's see. I think that's the one I want. Okay, yeah. And you can see where I blemished it a little bit. And right above the little yellow streak on the nose where it says TM76, I used a little bit of tape, detacked tape, to help guide the streaks, but the you guys know that any kind of metallizer paint comes off very easily. And when I pull it off, just a little bit came off, and I left that blemish. And I looked at it, and I looked at the pictures, and I went, you know, that actually looks like the discoloration on the aluminum on some of these things I saw that were just, you know, because they're out in the weather or whatever. And I decided not to patch it. It actually added a little bit of patina to it. And I was like, oh, it looks good. I like that. So, and you can see the little faint streaks on it. Now, I had to be careful. There's a real temptation to want to overdo it. I believe they are wing fences, actually. And remember, it was a unpiloted aircraft with a pretty primitive autopilot, so they had to have every stabilization and the device they could put on there. That's one reason there's so much dihedral in the tail fins and the horizontal stabilizers. And I found, God, 50 different paint schemes for this thing, except for a few of them. I was just talking about this with someone earlier today. The now the Beaumark has a horizontal stabilizer. The Snark does not. I can actually answer that question, and I'll look back to that real quick. The units that went out online, most of them I found were just bare aluminum. They did get back in the habit of putting nose art on them. That became a thing. Now, not all of them, but some of them did. Now, a lot of them you'll see photographed. It's a little hard to make the nose out. It looks like it's oversized because it had these big covers that went over them. And but when they would actually be launched, it was like this. That's one reason. It's also why I painted the truck olive drab. Now, I have the History Maker series in which the mace and the truck are both OD green. You see a little piece of wood behind the spare tire. That was a spacer I had to put in there just to hold some tension on that tire while the glue hardened. One of the pieces fell off. I put it back on. I couldn't get it to fit right, so I had to get the tire glued into place against the forward piece. And then once that hardened, I took that spacer out, moved that other piece in, glued it down, and put a spacer behind it. Long story. It's just part of a repair that I was doing. But a lot of the photographs of trucks are blue. When they're on Air Force bases, they were usually blue. But the box has an olive drab. And the deal is that, at least the way I see it, is that the trucks would be painted green if they were going to go tactical out in the woods. But if they were on Air Force Base or something like that, they probably were painted blue. Most of the color pictures I saw, they were painted blue. But to me, that just didn't resonate as being very tactical. It also depends when the photos were taken. Now, here's the catch on that. This is where I was going to go with this. One reason there are so many pictures of these things with wild paint schemes on them and bright blue Terra Cruisers, and so few pictures of them in the bare aluminum with the or an olive drab with the olive drab Terra Cruisers, that when they are in the test phase, they're getting photographed all the time. They have to be. I mean, part of it, as much as anything else, the test program is sort of a sales brochure for the system. So they photograph everything, and they get as many photographs out as they can. The manufacturers do this. The military does it. It's basically a promotion for the system. Once they are fielded, though, now they're a secret military asset, and you don't want a lot of pictures taken. Plus, when these things were in operation, you know, everybody didn't run around with a cell phone in their pocket. They could snap photos. Taking a picture was a big thing to do. And I'm pretty much guessing that if these things were on alert and you went out there putting a camera to your face, you were going to get a visit from the SPs. Now, getting back to the question was asked about how come it has a horizontal stabilizer. The Mace is a follow-on to the Matador. And the Matador was, of course, started pretty shortly after World War II. So it was using basically World War II technology. And you built airplanes with tails on them. When Snark came about, and the reason I know this is because I happen to have the honor of knowing one of the people who was on the Snark development team for some time. He was a 30-year Lockheed man. But even though I think Snark was Northrop. But the point is that Snark was a completely different system by a different manufacturer. And when they made it, they thought that eliminating the tail wasn't necessary. They could eliminate it, but also, and this is when you get into mission specificness, Snark was a much larger range, longer range system than Mace. Mace was and Matador were both relatively short range systems by comparison. Snark was supposed to be able to go all the way from Presque Maine to Russia. And if you remember, a lot of the Snark models, you see the drop tanks on them because they had to carry that much fuel. Whereas Mace, you don't see that. Just like Snark, and one way you can tell that the Snark was so much bigger is the Snark had two boosters to get it off the short rail launcher, whereas you notice Mace only has a single solid rocket booster. Which, by the way, the tail, where the tail meets the fuselage, and that booster were the only two parts of this that really had bad gaps. A little bit on the nose of the cab of the Terra Cruiser, but other than that, the most of the fits on this were very good. But the Snark had a different mission than Mace, and they weren't really competitors. Now, Beaumark did have a tail, and Beaumark was actually a interceptor. It was designed to go up and pop, if necessary, pop off a nuke in the middle of a Russian bomber formation 75 or 100 miles away. And the idea behind Beaumark was short range, relatively speaking, short range, go up and blow airplanes out of the sky. Mace, by comparison, was a surface-to-surface system, as was Matador, and Snark was a nuclear delivery platform in the strategic level. Mace and Matador would probably be considered, you could consider them strategic. They're part of the strategic asset, but they were a little more the tactical field thing. For example, Snark, even though it was on a short rail launcher and could be towed by a tractor, it was never really intended to go over land. Mace was an asset that you were, because the wings folded on Mace. I don't know if you guys know that. And you had the option of building this with the wings folded, and I thought about it just because it'd be a little easier to display. But it just looks too cool with the wings out there. Personally, I plan to display it with the erector elevated and like it's getting ready to launch. But if you wanted to set up for transport, you could. And of course, it'd have an option of a nuclear or a conventional warhead. But all these things had different missions, and of course, being designed by different manufacturers, they were designed with different philosophies. Getting back to why Snark doesn't have a horizontal stabilizer, the people who designed Snark realized all I had to do was fly in a straight line. It didn't have to maneuver, and by eliminating the horizontal stabilizer and building the aileron or the flaperons and everything into the wing, you got rid of surface area, you got rid of drag. You did it somewhat at a cost of, one could argue, of stability, but the thing flew up into thin air, and they just figured we don't need it. We can since it doesn't have to do maneuvers, and it was a later design. And a few other platforms have followed that way. If you notice, a lot of the modern drones and stuff are tailless. It's just, but Matador and Mace, given when they were designed, that was just the way airplanes were made. And they're comparatively conservative designs compared to the Snark. You're asking why is the truck Army? It's not. It's Air Force. In fact, if you look right here on the rear, you can see where it says U.S. Air Force. The Air Force does, in fact, paint a lot of their equipment olive drab when it's going into the field. They're big believers in camouflage. You look at Army, Air Corps, and Air Force equipment that was like fielded in Korea and stuff, and they're not going to put bright blue targets. Usually the bright blue vehicles you see are for stateside or maybe on an Air Force base. A lot of their equipment is subdued green or camouflage when they are going to put it where the enemy may be able to take a pot shot at it. So it actually is an Air Force truck. I saw a lot of olive drab Air Force equipment when I was in the service. In fact, I'd say most of it was. Apostle is bringing something not looking very tactical. I will also point out that when I was before I went in the Army, when I was a little kid in the 60s, the Army uniforms, the olive drab uniform, which wasn't much different than the one that I would later wear when I was in the Army, the olive drab uniforms had a big black tape with bright yellow letters said U.S. Army, and on the other side they had this big white tape with your name in black, so it was easy to read. And that was about as tactical as a flare. And of course, guys, I remember seeing pictures of my ROTC instructor when he was in the Army in Korea. He got his Silver Star at Port Chop Hill, and they're on the front lines with these big, not terribly tactical there, LT. You know, I thought, well, that was the technology of the day. And some guys would cover them up and take them off, and you know, when they got in the in the forward areas, it was like you could always tell a new lieutenant because he'd have out there with his big shiny gold bars on, and like, hey, dude, take that off. All that is sniper bait. But one of the big things about Mace was that, and Matador and Snark, is they were jet powered. Those solid rocket boosters just got them off the rails, but they were basically just pilotless jets, which meant they were prone to interception. In fact, the early Matadors were radio controlled, and one of the big weaknesses is the enemy learned pretty quick how to jam the signal or to intercept it, and which had the, you know, basically the same basic outcome. And this is kind of one of the reasons for the move towards a little bit of autonomy in these systems. You know, hey, let's make them a little less vulnerable, shall we? And of course, it's just the technology getting pushed by things. Also, when you see Mace or Matador or any of the others, they evolved over time. You know, an early one and a later one had some differences, even they looked identical from the outside. But all of these things were stopgaps. None of them really had that long of a service life because the technology, what everyone needed was something that they could transport easily, set up quickly, fire accurately, and get the heck out of Dodge. This is why missile systems like the Corporal, which is probably something I'm going to start on next. I'd like to have more than... I built this for the Cold War missile build, but I would also like to get the Corporal done if I have time. We'll see also when I get the V2 done, because the V2 is kind of the original Cold War missile, because that, you know, it literally went from the hot war, World War II, and was the incubus of a lot of competing rocket programs. So it became the impetus for I consider the V2 the first Cold War missile. It actually bridges the hot war to the Cold War. And depending on when you're in the service, also, a lot of guys, if they served during a certain time, they can look at the markings on an aircraft or a piece of equipment and tell you roughly when that was, because regulations on marking stuff changes from time to time. By the time I got in the Army, they'd gotten rid of everything shiny or bright. The vehicles were either green or camouflage. All markings were in dull black, to the point you almost couldn't read them. And but all the uniforms, everything was olive drab with black. And when the BDUs came out, they kept the olive drab tapes with our names on them, so you could read the names. So you'd have this olive drab, or you'd have this camo BDU battle dress uniform with a woodland pattern camouflage with this olive drab tape on each side, one that said U.S. Army and one that still had your name on it. But what the Army wanted and finally got were systems like Lance, which was the final Army missile. Now, think about this. So since we're talking about Cold War missiles this month, you've probably seen some of the documentaries that talk about how long it took the Germans to erect a V2 and get it up. It took hours. I mean, the thing had to be transported, it had to be put up in the erector, it had to be balanced, leveled, zeroed. All the gyros had to be spun, it had to be fueled. That was the really critical part. And the whole system was very prone to get attacked. So if you're zipping along looking for a target of opportunity in your Mustang doing a fighter sweep, and you see a V2 being erected, I mean, it's just meat on the table. And I don't know how many of those things that we actually picked off. Everybody talks about the vulnerability that was created, but I don't know how many of them were actually ever hit. But as war advanced and things started happening faster and faster, they started realizing we don't have 4 hours or 2 hours to set this thing up. Well, now the war's over. We're trying to set up the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, ABMA, which still exists today. I've been there many times, out at Huntsville, Alabama. They kind of stamped von Braun, you know, property of the U.S. Army. And he builds, we start testing the LV2s, we improve them, and of course the Redstone is just a direct follow-on to the V2. And one of the things they did do, though, that was a big plus is the V2, if I remember right, it had 8 fuel lines that had to be pumped the fuel into the combustion chamber, and it was a bit of a spider web. And the big advance on the Redstone was as von Braun, now that he had decent material and nobody was shooting at him, and he wasn't threatened to be shot by the SS every other day, he and his guys could sit back and perfect the design, and they got it down to 1 feed tube, so that it was a much simpler engine. And the Redstone actually became known as Old Reliable. And if you remember a Saturn 1B, that's a cluster of like 9 H model Redstones, which they're just follow-on Redstones. That's why it has all those rocket bodies underneath. It works. Very, very simple, very reliable, very tested program. So, but the Army has a problem. Is that Redstones and Jupiters, they still have to be, transported, put on launching pads, erected, fueled, just like a V2. They're not really transportable systems. I mean, they kind of are, but you got to really own the airspace and the battle space to have time to set them up. And so they're like, we need something that can get up quicker. We need something more tactical. So they come up with the Corporal Missile. Now, you had the Whack Corporal, which was a little skinny one, and it was a research missile. And they said, hey, this thing works. We can upscale it. And so they made the Corporal, which is a much bigger missile. And the Corporal, somebody sent me some photos recently of one being set up around 60, 61, about like at a demonstration. And even in an administrative situation, like just at an air show or something, these guys would take a long time to set this thing up. Well, on a modern battlefield, they're subject to, counter firing artillery strike, air attack. They're completely vulnerable. And the military knew that, this is a stopgap. It gives our guys, the battlefield commander, a big stick, but and I think if I remember correctly, a Whack Corporal battalion had like 17 vehicles to get their battery into operation, because you had to have all those, had different kinds of liquid fuels that had to be transported, and of course driving around with acidic rocket fuel in a truck, nothing ever goes wrong with that. Pothole, boom. But I overstate, but still, it was just a logistics nightmare. And just teaching guys to handle these fumes, and you're in the field and everything, is just to handle these fuels. This is some touchy stuff. I mean, go read some of the names of some of the fuels, like red fuming nitric acid. And that's only one of the fuels. So then they finally start perfecting the solid rocket fuel. They figured out how to mix in the rubbers and everything, the polymers, and they actually found a polymer that I think it was a polymer that made a decent rocket fuel with a few changes. Like, oh, look, and look, we can make Play-Doh out of it. Now this stuff, the beauty of these solid rocket motors is there's no refueling trucks, nothing. The motor is loaded at the factory and shipped to them. All they got to do is screw it into the rocket, and all of a sudden you get these later systems that have solid, like lacrosse, that have solid rocket motors. Man, all you need is the rocket on the truck. That's it. Boom, we're on our merry way. You got rid of a lot of infrastructure. And the thing is, apparently, systems like lacrosse, you could whip them into place. It didn't not take long to set up and fire that thing. Problem was they couldn't steer it worth a crap. Lacrosse was a short-ranged missile. It was basically a type of artillery, but it was supposed to be precision, so you could knock out a command bunker or something really important with it. Again, radio guided, prone to intercept, very short service life, but an important intermediate step. Well, as time went by, inertial systems improved and everything, and of course now we got GPS. But the long and the short of it is, the Army finally started getting dry, solid fuel rockets that were highly portable, very reliable, could be launched in a hurry. And then once we did, they all went into fairly permanent sites with like Pershings and the like. I know some folks that actually worked on Pershing missile sites in the Army. Now, these were nukes. But apparently at Pershing, if the word went up, they were gone. And the reason this is important is the enemy realizes we're not going to get away with a sneak attack. If it takes him 4 hours to get his missiles ready to fly, we could sneak attack and sort of a Buck Turgison, a really good chance of catch them with their pants down, Mr. President. for those who remember Dr. Strangelove. But with these, now that they had all these little tactical nukes with their little, ready to, pop and fly solid rocket boosters, yeah, you were going to get one nuke off and then everything was going to come back your way. And then they got a more advanced system called Lance that they used for a long time. And I believe the Lance was the last nuclear missile the Army had. After that, the Army got out of the nuke business. The Scuds, you're talking about the Scuds. Well, Scud was the name for the Russian system. You're talking about Saddam. The Russian system was Scud. Saddam lengthened the missile, added fuel to add range because he was Saddam. And the problem was a lot of those, we still called them Scuds, but they weren't really Russian-built Scuds. Or at least they were highly modified. And the Russians kind of went, yeah, those not the ones we made, because they made the rocket a certain size for a certain reason. And when you just lengthen a rocket and add more fuel, a lot of other things change. Your center of gravity changes, the efficacy of the effectiveness of the guidance system gets compromised because red fuming nitric acid. That should be a cocktail. I'll have a red fuming nitric acid, which is basically a cosmopolitan with a shot of whiskey. No, a Cosmo, because it's already red, with Tabasco sauce. That'll be a cocktail called, hey, we just invented a cocktail, guys. The red fuming nitric acid, a Cosmo with Tabasco sauce. Okay, Roy's asking about the Davy Crockett, the Nuke-Zuka. That's what I call it, the nuclear bazooka. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but just because we're having a good time, and I love the sound of my own voice, we shall briefly describe. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are pulling it up on Google right now. And it's actually exactly what he just said. It's really more of an RPG. Let's take a very small nuclear bomb and stick it and put a little tiny rocket motor on the back of it and stick it in a tube on a tripod and shoot it at the enemy. This is basically an overrun weapon. The range of the weapon is so short that the crew that fires it is inside the blast radius of their own bomb. So the first step of using the Davy Crockett is to dig a very deep trench, which is very possibly going to end up being your grave. But how convenient. But the main thing is that you do this so that you can hide from the blast. But this is the kind of weapon, this is a desperation weapon. This is something you use when, back when I was in the Army, everybody was for, the great commie hordes are going to come across the Fulda Gap, and, thousands upon thousands of tanks crushing everything in their path. Basically it's a Godzilla movie. So the idea is that, when the great commie hordes are coming and you can't stop them, this is a last-ditch weapon for the military, for the Army to try and slow them up. The Red Max. Okay. A new cocktail, the Red Max. Hey, Sarah Jane. But I don't know if they ever actually fielded the system. I know obviously they never used it. Thank God. But it's one of those concepts. It is the holy hand grenade. And thou shalt not count to 3 or 4, for 4 shall be too great. But what happens is, you when you look at it in a vacuum and just go, what moron came up with this idea? It's easy to take that tack, but then you start thinking, oh, wait a minute. If they're using this thing, I mean, they are literally backs against the wall. No one's getting out of here alive. So that was yeah, when they said, okay, you're going to use the Davy Crockett, that's it was a good life. I'm glad I lived it. Someone has to do the calculations on how far a small part can bounce and ricochet while trying to glue it. Well, Raul Baltus, I have done the math on that combined with my anecdotal, and I'm pretty sure that if I hold the tweezers just right, I can put a small piece of plastic into orbit. The Medal of Honor rocket. Yeah, that's a good name. But when I was in the Army, we had the 66 millimeter Law light anti-tank weapon, which is basically a collapsible one-shot throwaway 66 millimeter bazooka. and had a shape charge in it. And this is what you'll shoot at the tanks. And oh, great, we're the airborne, so we travel light, but we've got this anti-tank weapon, which is, by the way, far more often used, particularly in Vietnam, against bunkers, and turned out to be pretty good for it too. It's a handy little weapon to have. It's basically a throwaway bazooka. Bazookas are definitely easy to extremely well. The RPG is the basically the Russian answer to the bazooka. The Germans had the Panzerfaust and the Panzerschreck, when one's basically an RPG and the other's basically a big bazooka, and they were both surprisingly effective. So it does give the foot soldier a lot of firepower. But one day we're doing these big, they brought down the armor guys and we're fighting against them, and I'm sitting there with my little simulator, law simulator, and the smoke clears and there's an M60 tank in front of me. And I'm like, bink! And of course the thing just goes pop, and sends a little Miles laser tag to hit the tank. And the guys inside probably get beep, oh, you just got hit by a law. And I realized, looking at that 50-ton monster, I'm sitting there looking at my little law rock, and I'm like, right. People are like, well, what if you detrack him? So he just runs me over with one track. So it just, now on an APC, yeah, because APCs have that aluminum armor, but on a serious, main battle tank, I wouldn't count on taking one out with an RPG although the RPG is a good effective system. In fact, or a law, but yeah, that's when you get on the radio and call for artillery, an A-10 or something. Although one could make the argument, and it's been made, that the RPG is the single most cost-effective weapon system fielded in the history of humanity. Apparently, the Russians can manufacture an RPG round for, back in the 80s, it was probably around $4 or $5. And that thing really can take out, a couple of them can take out an armored vehicle or knock out a bunker or anything other. The RPG is an impressive system. And that's why they're used all over the world, and it's ridiculously cheap. B-25 landing gear. I am sure that one of these days some model builder is going to go into space, he's going to go into orbit, and he's going to see all these missing model parts go flying by in steady state orbit. The blooper, M79. I carried the M203. By the time I got in the Army, the M79 is a single shot. Looks like a blunderbuss is what it looks like, and it's a 40mm grenade launcher. And but when I got in, they'd replaced it with the M203, which went on the bottom of an M16. So because the M79 gunner normally just carried a 45 for personal defense, and he used the blooper for fighting with. And just like a good skeet shooter, a guy who knew how to use the blooper, it's amazing how, even without using a sight, these guys often get a feel for it, and they could be pretty effective even in the dark. They by sound, some of them could even, yeah, he's right about there. But the M203 allowed the Grenadier to also have an M16, so it increased the firepower. So Michael says that all the missing plastic parts are on the dark side of the moon in a holding area. Okay. Blooper. Here's something that is odd, and I could be wrong on this, but you could actually buy an M79 like you buy a shotgun, because that's basically all it is, a big fat shotgun. It's the grenade that's the class 3 part, I think. Don't hold me to that. But basically, the blooper is just a single shot breech loader. And if you get yourself a couple of spent casings and primers, you can just put some dummy warheads on it and just, boop, like Play-Doh or something. Or not Play-Doh, but hard wax or something like that. And you can sit there and play with it. Of course, if you get the weight just right, you can get it ballistically accurate. It's a really simple system and surprisingly effective. What is that saying? If it's stupid, it works. It's not stupid. And just because it's simple doesn't mean it's bad. And but I don't recall seeing any N79 equipped infantrymen. And all the infantry kits I've had, I've seen them with M1s, M14s, M16s. A lot of them with Thompsons, some with 45s. But I have never seen that I can recall, I have never seen a scale model figure with an M79. Even seen them with M60s. And that's not right, because those important little... Oh, they are NFA restricted? Okay. But a 37 is... Okay, all right, I can see that. Which explains why the one they use on Scarface at the end, I want you to meet my little friend. That's supposed to be an M2. That's actually a 37 millimeter, not a 40 millimeter, and I think that explains why I got them running NFA stuff. And of course, 3 millimeter difference, you can't really tell to look at it. But of course, it keeps somebody from wedging a 40 millimeter in there. Oh, by the way, just on a quick side note, the Army has two kinds of 40 millimeter rifle grenades. One of them is the short one, which goes in the M79 and the M203. Now, I don't know if this is still current to today, but when I was in. But the Cobra, for you guys, a lot of you guys know the Cobra has a 40 millimeter cannon, auto cannon on it. And the chin turret could carry a minigun, or it could carry, in fact, it could also carry, I believe, two 40 millimeter full autos. Some folks don't realize this, but the option on the Cobra chin turret, there were actually several ways you could arrange. It wasn't the turret could house several different systems that were made for it, and but it used, I think it was the M129, but it used a longer 40 millimeter grenade. It had a longer casing on it because it's being fired from an aircraft, and on a bigger system, it needs more push. Well, I happened to see a training film about this when I was in high school, ROTC, and sure enough, one day, and they're telling you, do not shove one of these into an M79 or M203. It will blow the gun up. They're not supposed to fit, but with enough force, trust me, a GI can get one in there. Remember the old joke, you know, you make something idiot-proof, we'll make the better idiot. We went to the grenade range at Fort Campbell, and the ammo starts getting cracked open, and the lieutenant's like, this thing doesn't want to fit. And I looked at it, and it was too long because I was an M203 gunner, and I knew what a 203, I'd only fired 6 real live M203 rounds in my life, but I knew what they looked like. Sir, that's an M129 round, and it even says so on the box. These are for Cobras. These are not for our guy. And that was it. We did not shoot grenades that day. Thank God. And the Army has put ridiculously big guns on anything that flies. I've seen a picture of a 40 millimeter Bofors gun hanging out the side of a UH-1. And I'm like, really? Somebody thought this was a good idea? I know guys that to the day don't like the 50 calibers on the things because when they're firing, because the Black Hawk, you know, the gunner's right behind the pilot. And they've actually got those things where they can lock facing forward so they can quote unquote strafe. That puts a barrel right outside the pilot's ears. Anybody ever been around the business end of a 50 cal? Because that's some serious concussion coming out of the thing. He was telling me when he fired that thing, it rattled his teeth. He couldn't see straight. They did like one burst and no. There are so many systems out there, and speaking that my wife had suggested something, and I was thinking about it. She said at some point down the road, why don't you have the Glue Troopers do a model build where you everybody would create their own Tom Daniel inspired, TD-esque kit model of a car or a plane or a truck or a tank, something that TD would have come up with, as an inspiration, but, make your own, create your own, which I thought, okay, we'll talk about doing that. But when I looked at some of the pictures of these helicopters, the guns hanging out of them were so comically large. I was like, that almost looks like something TD would have designed, because the way he liked to put things on there. I'm like, but this actually came from the mind of Army designers. I'm like, it would not take much exaggeration or styling change to turn some of these actual pieces of equipment into a TD Tom Daniel-esque design. And what Trey's is talking about, I knew a guy that was one of my high school ROTC guys, Sergeant Gibson, and he was there when they were putting the 50 cals in UH-1s. He's like, I wrecked the whole chopper, he couldn't fly, couldn't do anything. My God, they're trying to come out of their own mounts. It's just just too much gun for that kind of thing. That's why you always see them carrying M60s, you know, the 308, because it's much more. And the thing is that 4 M60s have less recoil than 150 cal because the way it works. Oh, you like that idea? Well, okay. Well, we'll put that. Guys, don't let me forget. We're after the Cold War missile build. For Christmas will be the car build. I think the beginning of the year is going to be the airliner build, followed by the ship build, if I remember right. So probably sometime around March, April, May, we'll see about doing the Tom Daniel inspired. And I'll you know what? If I can, I'll send an email to TD and tell him what we're up to and see what he thinks. I bet he'd love to see the video. And just remember, one of TD's things was whatever he designed, it had to be something that could really exist and really work. I mean, it can be elongated, exaggerated, whatever, but you know, some of his designs are actually people that went and made the actual car after they saw his design. So with me, it would be the garbage truck turned into the party wagon. But I got to admit, I do like the beer wagon also. So those would be, which, if you didn't know, the beer wagon was actually the first one he did. Yeah, after the Cold War, it's going to be cars, automobiles. The Cold War build, remember, guys, is I hope to get. I mean, this isn't a military deadline, but I'd like to have it out on Halloween, and then it'll be the car build, and I'd like to have the cars done by Christmas. I figure that's November, December, and then we won't have anything till the New Year because everybody holidays, and then the New Year, I think we're going to kick off the airliner build. Oh, so to me, it did include somebody with an M79. Well, that's good. And the correct 20-round magazines, which a lot of guys would only put 16 rounds in. Don't even get me started on that whole M16 debacle in Vietnam. But, yeah, the OH-58 and the OH-6 both had minigun mounts, and I have recently seen photographs of modern, well, I think the Army's trying to get away from the 58 platform, but I did see some OH-58s that had 50 caliber slung on the just above the skids, and they were not articulating guns; they were fixed, but a lot of weight for the little chopper to pick up. Airliner build qualifications: be an airliner, which pretty much means anything from Tony Jannus's Benoit flying boat to the Concorde, and we would also accept a wannabe, you know, could have been airliner like the TWA Valkyrie turned into an airliner. You know, thing is, airliner. It prop jet doesn't matter. And you're free to kit bash as long as it's something that could have been. I don't want to turn these things into heavy rule laden things. I want us to all have a good time. So okay, good. That's exactly. And I actually, you guys probably know that when World Glazer had to take over at Revell, they decided that is it for April? Okay, keep me honest, guys. Maybe it was a ship in January and the airliner in April. I don't know. I wrote this thing down somewhere, and it's probably never going to be seen again. So we will. If one of you guys remembers what order I said it in, email it to me, because I did write it down. It's something else, and it should be right here on the desk. And that is something completely. This is why I should never clean up my desk. Oh well, we'll figure it out. A Jeep can be a car, but a car can't be a Jeep. Well, a Jeep will qualify as a car for the purposes of our build. And by the way, you can also do an airliner helicopter. Somebody sent me an airliner helicopter model a while back that I might see if I can get that done with the airliner build also. Just got to be an airliner, and again, it can be a fictitious airliner from a movie. Like if you want to make the German SST from The Man in the High Castle or something like that, that would be fine. So Royal Glazer never built a model before, and they thought, well, you're going to take over a model company, you should build one. I think the story I was told, I think they gave her a Constellation model or the Revell Connie model, and she wound up getting the wings on backwards. And I was thinking, a Connie with pushers. That'd be a pretty awesome looking what if airplane. Um, and we're also going to have a kit bash thing at some point also. And so you said that my airliner was down for April. I'm going to use this. Anything important? I think it's already been delivered. So, all right. So we're doing Cold War build now. Cars due December. I think it ships in January. Ship January to March. Then airliner in April. And after that, I'll put Tom Daniel inspired build. And then after that, I will put kit bash. Sci-fi was supposed to be in here somewhere also. No, I'll just make a sci-fi note. And we will get it all worked out. Now, I need you guys to chime in on something. How long do you think you need to do these? Because I'm thinking a month may not be enough, because I know a lot of you guys have jobs and everything and family commitments. But 3 months seems a little too long. So, oh yeah, Model Palooza. I'm off. I might have to sit. Okay, guys, Model Palooza. Okay, I'm gonna make it 22 to 24. I'm just going to put MCO because that's when you're a pilot. That's how you say Orlando. I have to look into that. I think I'm off then. It would help if I put the correct month. I might actually be able to get down there for one day. Fortunately, Florida's an open state, so we're still holding public events. 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So 2 months would be a decent ballpark. I mean, that's kind of an agreed upon thing. 6 to 60 days-ish. Okay. All right. So I'm going to... Okay. We'll make ship January, Feb. You know what? Sci-fi. Feb, March. Airliner, April, May. Tom Daniel, June, July. Kit Bash, Aug, September. That's just tentative right now. Why would you want to quit sniffing glue? So I think we're agreed 2 months will be our... So we'll do about 6 of these things a year. That's good. That's good. That way nobody's rushed. Level of complexity is up to you. We keep the rules kind of open because I want everybody to have a grand old time. And, okay, we're... I'm sitting here looking for my glass going, I know I just had it in my hand. It's literally hidden right behind the microphone where it just perfectly blocked it. So, by the way, guys, as a side note, something I just got the email on today, which I imagine a lot of you got the email on if you guys are subscribed to Atlantis Updates. They're going to be putting the glow-in-the-dark Parts Godzilla out of production, and they say they're running low on stock. My guess is they've kind of sold them until they can't sell no more. But if you wanted to get one of those, I would get the order in. Not trying to, be a salesman for Atlantis. It's just something I saw that I thought, okay, well, well, remember... Now, guys, you know what I should do? I need to post this. You don't have to wait to start. I mean, if you want to start working on your kit bash now, this is just when we're going to have them come in. That way, if you've got some in-depth project you'd like to work on, that's going to take a few months, hey, you got plenty of time. And don't know why I'm so adamant about keeping my glass of tea off camera, like somehow that matters. because all of this clutters, viewers sent me these books, and some of them are this is from Mr. Keller, and the 13 Horrors. I'm like, yeah, don't really want to read this before I go to sleep. The other thing I was going to talk about was we ought to talk about how, you guys know I love Hollywood movies. I'm going to scroll through a few pictures here to find what I'm looking for. And we had talked about this once before. Not that one. Not that one. Yep, I got it together here, guys. These are the Grumman biplane fighter plane props that were used in, I believe it was Flight Command. And I have always just been very enamored with the quality of the work that was done. Now these things, this Grumman F3 was rebuilt. That's the guy on the bottom left is actually rebuilding it. And I was just amazed at the quality of workmanship that went into making the original props. And I mean, you could just about make a real one. And I think this is it in the middle being rebuilt. But yeah, that is just amazing attention to detail, and for something that's just a prop. And I realize it's just hollow inside, but to me that's kind of the ultimate model building, 1-to-1 scale, and but when you see the thing on camera, it's bloody convincing. And I mean, I thought they'd rolled a real airplane into the soundstage and had used that. I mean, I knew it was rear projection and everything, but there's no giveaways on there that hey, this is just a movie prop. And it's made of wood, but they made the metal and the rivets look like aluminum. I think that's impressive. Somebody sent me those pictures today, and we talked about this a long time ago. But can the kit bash be anything? Yes, the kit bash can be anything you want it to be. When I say kit bash, that is pretty much the only rule. If somebody shows me a photograph of a stock model, I'm like, okay, where's the bash? Stepping on it with your foot does not constitute a kit bash. You can be, and of course it can be fantasy, it can be any, but I'm thinking that making it something believable, I guess is the word I'm looking for, would kind of be the goal of the thing. But sci-fi, aircraft, car, whatever, if I had not seen it in the movie and it didn't already exist, well, actually, let me rephrase that. You can kit bash a real thing as long as it's not what the kit was made of. For example, if you get some model cars and we're like to kit bash that thing that Nemo drove in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or if you were to take a sedan and convert it into a station wagon, well, that's still kit bashing. Okay. Normally you think of kit bashing as, that brings up an interesting debate. Modifying versus kit bashing. Okay, let's say I want to build a Country Squire wagon, I can't find a kit, but I found a Crown Vic, so I kit bash, I modify, chop it up, and I make the proper manufactured station wagon, starting off with the sedan. Is that a kit bash, or is that just a modification? Or here's an example someone I know actually did. Before there were kits of the Supernatural car, and I can't believe it took them this long to get one out, people were taking the 4-door 67 Impala and kit bashing it or modifying it into the 2-door. Now, that's not as easy as you'd think, because they actually have a different rear on the back of the cab you know, 90% of the car is the same. You know, you remove the B pillar, but if you want to make it accurate, you have to think you have to extend or shave down. I forget. Anyway, it's a very, very subtle change that the car enthusiasts are going to pick up on right away. So, and the guy did that. So that the roof lines are different, exactly. So that brings up the question: does that constitute a modification or a kit bash? And that's, you know, since these are kind of quasi-sliding frames, you are modifying an existing model into a real car that existed. But someone could say, but the people say, oh, I kit bashed this into this. So, yeah, you got to remove the B pillar. Actually, I'm not sure if the 69 had a quarter window. I forget offhand. I think it did, but yeah. So, and of course, we would accept that. I'm not going to say, oh, I'm not going to show your model because it's a modification. But the spirit of the kit bash, to me, and I'm not telling you, you make your own mind up. But to me, the spirit of the kit bash is to create something that doesn't exist. Could exist, but doesn't. If you turn something into something else, you are doing a type of kit bashing, but it's really you're modifying it. You're converting. It's conversion. And I saw a guy that did he converted an SR71 to what he thought the follow-on thing would look like. It was magnificent. You could see the SR71 Genesis in it, but he'd made so many curves and sweeps and changes and everything. I was like, and not a seam line to be seen. Paint was perfect. He really knocked it out of the park. Well, if you want to do a propeller power, that would be a kit bash, but you do know that the first ME262 did have a prop on the nose. They sent it up with a piston engine in the nose and then a jet engine on each tip, and that was because they just wanted to make sure they had something they knew that would work so the pilot could get back in one piece. I think they flew it a few times, but there aren't very many photographs. An Xb70 Airliner, if you just build the Xb70, for the Airliner build, yes. There's actually a Lindbergh kit based on the Xb70 that's an Airliner, TWA if I'm not mistaken. And they basically widened the fuselage, and that's actually an airplane that was proposed. But I wouldn't consider that a kit bash. That's just kind of redecaling an airplane, but I would consider it an airliner. You know, if you turn it into an airliner, yeah, sure. I would think you would want to make some changes, give it a bigger passenger section, which is what the guys, I think it was at Aurora, did. And I saw one of those things for sale that had already been built, and he wanted a pretty penny for it because they're kind of rare these days. But I thought about getting it, sanding it, because the decals have all gotten yellowed. I thought about getting it, sanding it down, but I was like, why? You know, I could get an XB70 just modified just as easily and not pay $200. If you add something like an interior engine wheels, if you take two or more kits, yeah, I see that. Hey, Black Sheep. I'm going to be kit bashing that Dornier 335, and this will finally get me off my butt to do it. The one TD sent me, and what I'm going to be doing is putting either a 6-blade or a contra-speed piston prop on front, the engine, the jet engine and back. I'm going to be lopping off the under fin because it won't need it, making a new tail fin and probably make it a T-tail or a cruciform tail, and putting the radar gear on it. So that's... my wheels are turning in my head about other things I could do with it. Like, oh, what if I put the prop on the back, put the jet engine on front, then I'm going to have all these cannons mounted out there. I'm like, oh, okay, hold on. Back off, cowboy. Now ain't the time to be daydreaming. Well, Michael, I tell you something you can do. If you don't want to chop up any of the kits you've got, I got easy solution for that. Get a couple of kits. You get some El Cheapo kits that you don't like. And then you just, I got these kits suck. I have no problem, you know. And oh, by the way, I had someone, I think was it Ricardo, asked me if I had some Spitfire canopies I could send him. Got them boxed up for you, but I don't know when I'm going to get to the post office. And let's see real quick. Yeah, it was Ricardo. Yeah, I just want to make sure I had that right. Ricardo, if you're out there, I've got 3 canopies, 2 vacuforms, and one of them's off an old Starfix kit. And I found a couple of exhaust pipes. One of them's pretty chewed up, but he was missing some parts for an old Frog or Airfix kit. Oh, and I got the P38 canopies. I found some vacuform P38 canopies. So I'll send those will go out when they go out. And you guys have been so generous to me. I'm always happy when I'm able to find a part or something somebody needs and help them finish a kit. Yeah. Yeah, just, you can go. Something else you can do if you want to really challenge yourself to kit bash. Instead of coming up with, I want to build this, so I got to buy these kits and make it. That's a fantastic thing to do. But another thing you can do is, and you can go on eBay or someplace and find people that are selling just these lots of broken models. I mean, you can get them for $5 half the time. You just add bags of parts. Just get a couple of those, dump them on a table, and go to work. See what get your mind. As the man said in Apollo 13, we got to make this fit into this using nothing but that, and I'm sure if you look around, you got plenty of leftover parts. And so a scratch build, okay, yeah. Model 1 Charlie, you're starting to you're out of my wheelhouse. I've tried. I can count all the scratch built models I've done on one hand, and weren't none of them things of beauty. But I will say this though, I was watching how they built all those models for Tora, the movie Tora, the big ship models and everything, and you can go out online and get the plans or anything. Carve yourself up some foam or balsa or whatever medium you want to use to get the basic structure, and then strip plank it or put styrene over it or heavy gauge cardboard. And of course they fiberglassed all theirs because they had to work and everything. But I looked at it and I was like, there's really nothing you can't make if you've got the basic idea where you want to go, and you just can cut up a frame and think building the frame first and then adding everything to it, which is the way most ship models are built. And I mean the big sailing models and everything. And I started realizing that I see these magnificent models they make in Hollywood. I'm addicted to that Pierce Films channel, Sense of Scale. That's and the models they make are just fantastic. And I realized to them it's just a gig. They build the model and they get paid. It's their job. But and then when the movie's over, who knows what happens? Half these things get scrapped, thrown away. And these guys always have these cool things. Airplanes and ships, I get. The part that amazes me is when they're making all these cars that look so good. And it seems like making a kit model car from scratch would be an extremely difficult thing to do. And they pull it off. And I don't know if they've got them, because given the scale, they're not kit models. Some of these things are like this big, and I'm like, and you can tell by looking at it that it's handmade. I mean, it's really good, but it's handmade. I'm like, okay, how did you do that? Because you weren't able to build that using like ship or aircraft techniques. You didn't build, or maybe they did build a frame up. I really don't know, but God, that's so much work. Couldn't you just gone and bought an RC car? I really think it would have been cheaper if they just wrecked a real car. And wait a minute. Let's go see what Sarah Jane said that got the old Tamiya Harrier FR1 is a notorious bad kit. Oh, I never built one. I did see a kit for a Ford racing car. Oh God, what was it? Ford Freyer, something like that. It looked like a McLaren, proto McLaren. I was like, I'd forgotten just how long Ford's been in the race car, but how many things they've been involved in where the race cars are concerned. Well, by the way, guys, I'm trying to dig up a little more information on that AMX3. I imagine a lot of you have already seen the videos that are out there about it, but I had stumbled onto that, and I didn't realize what a deal that thing was in car world, and it has really got some people excited. Um, but the one complaint about the one company I hear complains about on car kits is normal, and not, it's not a bad complaint. It's almost what you might call a good complaint, if that makes any sense. There's two companies actually, Fujimi and IMC, Industrial Motive Corporation, and both of them was the same complaint. They put in too many of the detailed parts that are too fiddly and hard to work with. And I'm like, well, as long as the complaint is it's got too much detail, I consider that kind of a good complaint. Being fiddly, well, that's not the model company's fault. The guys who built the car put that part on there that way. They're doing what they can with what they got. Now, I will freely admit I've never built either one of them either. I might have to get an ITC car kit sometime, see whatever. And that's probably not all kits. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying, I'm a little surprised that no one's made a kit of the AMX3, because apparently within the car community, who you'd be selling the kit to, you've got yourself a holy grail car, I guess is what you might call it. I would imagine whoever's got the rights to that thing would probably, yeah, give me 10 cents a kit, whatever. It's found money for them. Okay, let me laser range find your whatever it is they do with your car and plug it in the computer so that the 3D printer can make me an exact model that I can make a mold out of, and even as a resin. But okay, so I'm finishing up the May, so I want to get on the V2 and the WAC Corporal. I'd like to have those done in time for the shoe. No idea where I'm going to put them. That B29 and B25 I've got, I actually have them on the piano. They're the only two that are resident in the house because I'm run out of room in the Tarbis, and they're big. But the nice thing about B29 is my dad was a mechanic on them, and I'm sure he flew on them too from time to time. But I am probably going to do it up as a weather B29, like I did the little 1-144 one. And I want to, I might hang that one because I don't know any place I can put it. Just such a big wingspan. But if I do, it'll be wheels up. But and if I do it the way my dad described them, put it in the Alaska markings. The thing is, you always got to feather one of the engines because he said in that Alaskan super cold air where they were flying out over the Aleutians and out there to the border of Russia and back, it's freezing cold weather. And the superchargers, they always came back with a supercharger cracked on one of them. So he said they were always coming back on 3 engines, and which explains why they had 4 of the bloody things. But that, fortunately, they weren't carrying any bombs or anything, so they were much lighter than they would have been if they were on a bombing mission. Of course, I didn't even think about until I didn't even think about this till about a year or two ago. It was like a couple of years ago. My dad was. I looked at pictures from that were up there, the WB29s that were up there in Alaska, and they always get very slight mention. Any book on B29s, it might mention the WB29s. You might get one photo. No two of them are marked up the same way, and because they're all World War II hand-me-downs. I was like, how come these airplanes get so little recognition? They got all these other models of B-29 with all these photos, and the WB-29 is one paragraph and maybe one photo. Well, it turns out that there's a couple of reasons for that. One, there weren't that many WB-29s converted, but also the ones that had the little scoops on them, they weren't up there checking weather. They were up there getting air samples for the military intelligence and the scientific community to determine what the Russians were doing with nuclear weapons. They would get air samples, and they could tell if they're using strontium or plutonium, and the yield on it. Amazing what a little of that crap drifting around the atmosphere, you get a sample of it, how much information that people can derive from that. Oh, so they're really on spy missions. And which is one reason they never strayed into Russia. They stayed out because the Eland aircraft sometimes did, and a few of them got shot down. But apparently, they didn't have to go that far to get samples either, because the Russians were using some pretty nasty material that went way up in the atmosphere, pretty much drifted all the way to Canada. And but that's probably how I'll mark the thing up. And I will, then again, if it did put it wheels down to a diorama, I could pull the cowlings off and have my dad, model of my dad working on it. Hey, John. When I die, I'll be cremated on a pile of melting styrene. Yeah, I remember reading about the RV, and it wasn't the only one. They shot down one of the Elant C-130s, and it was. But it was a Cold War, but the word war was still in there. That's okay. We paid them back by winning. So, but, they shot down one of their own Trets trying to get an SR-71. So, yeah, go up, want to lock the radar on you, shoot a missile at you, so that when the SR-71 is streaking by, you can brake and turn away, and it'll go after the SR-71. Oops. Oh, what was the other? We had gotten on. Oh, there. Now see. Now I loaded this picture. Let me see if I can find it. You know what? I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to go download it again. Image. Here's a picture you guys may appreciate from the Air Force Museum. This is the Kettering Collection. Now, I actually called the Air Force Museum and asked them about this when I was doing the Johan video. Because in one article I had read that John Hanley's collection, because he was primarily an aviation guy, believe it or not, his collection of model airplanes that he had made himself were so good that they were on display at the Air Force Museum. So I call up, this, by the way, was sent to me by a Glue Trooper. I want to thank you very much for that. And this is the Catering Collection. Apparently, and I actually talked to one of the managers at the museum who, he gave me what information he could, but he didn't really know. Apparently, Hanley's models were on display at the Air Force Museum for some time, and the Catering Collection came up and they put that up. I don't know if any of these are Hanley's models, or if Hanley's models were returned to him, or what, or if they're in storage or what. Nobody at the museum knew either. Anyway, that is the model display at the Air Force Museum of the Kettering, and I think it's really impressive. And I don't know if that's the whole thing or not, but you guys, I don't know if you guys know, but Hanley made spotter ID models for the military during the war. I want to go to the Titan Missile Museum. I have not been there. Well, no, he did make spotter models, but apparently he also made detail models, some of which were in museums, and the Air Force Museum had. Now, how big or small the collection was, I have no idea. He may have only had a handful of models on display. For all I know, they may be there in some corner of the museum. Nobody there really knows. One of the problems the Air Force Museum has, although my understanding is they keep excellent records like the Smithsonian, is that, as generations pass, stuff kind of gets reshuffled. And sometimes you get people really not sure what's in the collection. And it's very difficult for a museum to pass on acquired knowledge like that because there's just so much of it. So, let's see. What else have we got on the agenda? Has anybody been having any trouble with getting your stuff delivered? Because I understand that I shipped something to somebody recently. Now, it was going to Canada, but it got there, but the postal service seemed to have been slowed down a little bit. Overall, I haven't really had too much trouble with it, but I know some folks have been saying they were waiting on stuff, and we actually, just to bore you with a little local news, we actually were just told we just did a recycle pickup, and our city just put out a thing that, look, we can't get enough people to come to work. Don't count on the recycle being picked up regularly like it's supposed to in the future. So I'm like, that ain't good. Especially when you go through as many boxes as I do. But Titan Solo for the Tarkov. Oh, is that where they filmed that? first Star Trek feature, First Contact, was actually filmed in a real silo. Oh, well, that's a cost saver. But and by the way, guys, if I'm not mistaken, and Hoodal, correct me if I'm wrong, you see things in movie credits like grip, best boy, and all that stuff. A gaffer, and I believe a grip is just what the name implies. He's the guy who's supposed to be able to attach anything to anything. Have I got that right? Whereas the gaffer is the guy that's covering everything with gaffing tape and throwing black cloth over stuff so it won't show in the background. And is it the grip or the gaffer that's the electrician? I used to know this kind of stuff. Okay, so people are having trouble getting their stuff. All right. I actually holds. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, from China. Yeah, okay. I imagine a lot of you guys have probably are. I'm going to say a name, and I think most of you are going to recognize it because one thing I've realized is a lot of us watch the same YouTube channels because a lot of times you'll send me a lot of guys send me links, and I'm kind of like, yep, I already saw that video. We're all watching the same stuff. And imagine a lot of you guys are familiar with Wendover Productions, and if you're not, you might want to check it out. Another one I highly recommend, Mustard. I know it's a weird name, but he makes some great animate. He does his own animations. They're really slick. He does a lot of aircraft and trains and stuff, and his information's good. Well, anyway, Wendover, Sam over at Wendover, is a really young guy. He hid his identity for a long time, but he did a video chat with somebody, and it got out. So now we all know what he looks like. But he did one on how the logistic chain is broken down to COVID, and he brought up an interesting observation that it isn't really the fault of COVID. COVID's more like the trigger, but he brought up just how delicate the chain is and how this little thing, but it exposed a lot of the weaknesses of our logistics chain, which it may have, he may have also been the one, or I saw one recently on that ship that got, was it Evergreen or whatever, that ship that got stuck in the Suez for a couple of weeks. It just makes you realize how delicate the logistics chain is. And when I was a kid, like I'd order something from the Squadron shop. It was better than Christmas when a package showed up in the mail, something you'd ordered. I mean, it was a celebration level event. I got a package in the mail. Let's have cake. Because it just took so much effort to get me to want cake. But 2 weeks was the average, because you would mail a check to like the Squadron shop, and about 2 weeks later would come back. And the thing probably spent 5 days in transit each way and a couple of days there. And we have all gotten so used to ring, bing. I mean, it's a couple of days, and I'm still amazed how fast some stuff gets delivered. And although today it's a lot more hit and miss, obviously. But when I still like getting boxes in the mail. Who doesn't? It's stuff. Look, stuff. Look, stuff. But this breakdown in our logistics chain. What you're telling me is we've just gone back to 1971. That's all. I mean, we survived then. We'll survive now. It's not that bad as long as it's not like your heart medicine or something. And trying to catch up on a few of the comments. But there was a little incident that happened just recently where apparently we all know, I try not to watch the news because I can't do anything about it and worry about it, but apparently some comment made by an American Air Force general resulted in some retaliatory comment made by a Chinese Air Force general. And I was just thinking to myself, guys, and you're a model builder, when you're like, will you guys stop talking like this? Because if we start shooting at each other, do I still get my models? God. That just ain't right. But, you know, so much stuff is popped in China these days that with COVID and everything else, if you are making them locally, you really have a big shipping advantage. I mean, the Port of it's Port of Long Beach, and I think it's Port of LA and Port of Long Beach, are the two major shipping terminals. And you're really, no matter how many models you're capable of making, no matter how popular they are, if you can't get them on the trains and get them to the customers, you know, they're dead weight. And I know there are a couple of companies. I know Atlantis is popping in right there in New York, so they're up on Long Island. So that actually gives them a big heads up. And I'm thinking these guys should be pushing that advantage. Pete, if you happen to see this, I would recommend you start pounding on the door over at Michael's and a few other places and go, listen, we make them right here in the good old USA. We got none of those problems with China, and we can stock your shelves. And as somebody else in the Midwest, it's not Revell. I don't know where round two. I used to know that if round two pops locally, or if they do it out of China, or both. They got so much going on. And if I remember correctly, I'm getting behind on the information. Tom Lowe's still there, but I think he actually sold out his interest. And I'm not sure I don't know anything about the people that took it over, if that's right. And but all I'm saying is that anybody that's making their stuff domestically, like Atlantis does, of course Glencoe, Glencoe right there in Worcester. Nick makes his stuff right there. He's actually in the plastics business. That's actually his primary business. And I know he's got some cantankerous old molds that are a nightmare to use, but I don't care. I like the stuff they make. You should make more of it, Nick. If I see a Glencoe model, these days, got the point, if I see a Glencoe model in a hobby shop, or anywhere, I pretty much just grab it because yeah, Mustard is great. He really is. He does some fantastic. He's one of my favorite channels. And I like him. I like Wendover. And I watch a lot of other channels, but I don't want to drag you guys down that rabbit hole. Although I imagine a lot of us probably, I'll bet you right now, at least half the people watching, have you seen Mustard, Wendover, Military History Visualized, The Great War, World War II, War Against Humanity, the stuff that Indy Nidell does. I'm actually a Patreon there. It's the only, that and one other channel, the other one's a Patreon. But, let's see, what else? Mike Machat, I'd absolutely watch Mike's channel. And, okay, Michael, take care. Thanks for joining us. Glad. We're going to be wrapping up here in about 25 minutes, probably. And, okay, so round two is good. All right. As big as they are, I'm surprised they don't just get their own stuff. And of course, the nice thing about not doing your own stuff, you contract it, is if things slow down, you're not out anything. You're not sitting on equipment that's not being used. Mark Felton, absolutely. And the history guy, yep. Lance Geiger, the history guy. Yep, you see, we're all watching the same stuff. And Tom Grigett, is he the one that does those stop motion builds? Because it's almost, Drachenfels. I definitely watch Drachenfels. But I learned more about ships from Drachenfels than anything else. Luke, I do occasionally watch that, but I'm actually subbed to Lucas C. And he does a great job. And Dave Fletcher. Dave Fletcher is I think is a British natural resource. The mustache. I mean, I don't know how he eats his soup, but God, he is a riot. And the thing is, the beauty is it's so natural. He's a riot without trying to be, but unbelievably knowledgeable. He really is a national treasure. Tom Grigott, I think, is the one who does those stop motion builds. What ticks me off is he goes through all the insane trouble, because I've done some stop motion. I know how much work it takes to do that, and he still makes a better model than I do. I'm like, that's just unfair. Not jealous, not jealous at all. And Lindy Beige, oh, the crazy professor from England. I love Lindy Beige. Lindy Beige. He's another one like it. You know, he's just naturally he's just being who he is, and he's just a wonderful person to listen to. Okay, don't know those two. I have seen. I think I've seen HI guys or HPI guy or HI guy. I know you're talking about. Yeah, Lindy Beige. Dukes does good work. Yeah, I can only imagine. It's got to take him forever. I mean, the man has definitely got some serious focus. I watch Plasmo, and Plasmo makes it look easy. And I go, oh, if he can do that, I can do that. And I tried. I'm like, okay, this did not turn out the same. Thoughty too. I've seen him. HPI guys. Yep. Dude. Yep. CNR Arsenal. Yeah. Othias over at CNR Arsenal. Yep. I watch a lot of his stuff. And Gun Jesus. Ian McCullum. They were recently doing. Well, actually, I'd commented a while back on something. I have a World War I Pattern 7 P17 rifle, which I still shoot occasionally, and it's over 100 years old, and super quick. I also sometimes watch Mentor Pilot, by the way. Also, and here's a piece of history trivia for you. Whenever you see a photograph, or most of the times you see photographs of American soldiers in the First World War, they're carrying the trusty dusty Springfield 1903, and which could honestly be called the American Mauser, because I'm pretty sure they just copied it. I watch Greg's Airplanes and Automobiles, yep, and very educational stuff. Well, anyway, we couldn't make enough of them. Well, 3 of the major American arsenals, including Eddystone Arsenal, which is where my rifle was made, so it's called an Eddystone, were already making the British Pattern 14, or pattern year or model of 1914 Enfield, and but it used the British 303, not the American 30-06. And this is a very small difference, but it's enough that the ammunition is not interchangeable. Well, when America entered the war, we needed a lot more rifles than we had, and we needed to be able to make them faster than we could. So they were going to convert these other factories, these other arsenals, over to making the Springfield rifles. But then somebody said, why? Just have them rebore the Pattern 14 rifle, which became known as the M17 or P17, for 30-06, and we'll issue it to our guys. So they did. Because these 3 major arsenals were already geared up to make these guns in huge numbers for the British, once they switched over, they were well able to outproduce Springfield by ratio 2-1. So if I remember correctly, when we went, by the time of the end of the First World War, we'd made 1 million Springfields and 2 million, or it might have been 3 million, but I think it was 2 million P17s or M17s, known as called the American Enfield. And but most of the photography, most of the pictures, see the guys are carrying Springfields. Well, that's because the Americans didn't want to promote the image. They told photographers, we don't want to promote the image of our guys with a British design rifle. We want to see them with an American rifle. Alvin York, the famous Alvin Medal of Honor winner from the First World War, he was carrying a P-17 when he earned his Medal of Honor. But when they put the statue of him up in front of the State House of his home state, and there's still today, he's got a 1903. So, and that was an intentional error. That wasn't an oversight. They just didn't want Blanco Lirio. I definitely watched Juan Brown, and also Dan Greider over at Probable Cause, and and Kutakilia is pointing out that Paul Mauser sued Springfield, and rightfully so, because they basically, it's a good rifle, let's make a copy. And I mean, the changes were basically just cosmetic. Anyway, also, because the British 303 is a rimmed case and the 30-06 is not, the rim is flush with the base of the case. You can actually put 6 of them, even though they had 5-round strippers, but you can top off a 6th round because there's extra room in the magazine. And I learned with my rifle that if you really push hard and put chamber load one, you can actually get a 7th round, chamber load the 7th, and have 6. So, and I actually did a demo on my Fun with Guns channel where I got 7 rounds into it and fired them off in rapid succession. By the way, the infield was also more accurate than Springfield, which is why it stayed in inventory a long time. Although Springfields were turned into sniping rifles, so were the American Enfields. And a lot of, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I believe the American Enfields were actually being used as sniping rifles up through Korea. I know they were used in the Second World War. And it's a pound heavier than the Springfield, which when you're in the infantry, that matters. But it was more accurate, and it also had a peep sight, adjustable peep sight on it that was so good that the Americans took that sight and put it on the Browning automatic rifle. So the BAR uses basically that sight. And that's how that happened. Yeah, there were concerns about getting the P-17s and P-14s mixed up, which could happen. By the way, and I think you guys probably all watched, I'm sure all you guys watched Nick Moran, the Chieftain. You know, there was the 76 millimeter high velocity gun was actually a 75. They called it a 76 to prevent the ammunition from getting confused, because if you had 75 millimeter and then 75 millimeter long, sooner or later some poor logistics guy is going to send the wrong ammo to somebody that won't be able to get used. So, I don't have to look at that. P-45 is quicker to manufacture than load. Yeah, I'll watch Dark Skies and Dark Space. I wish, I don't mean to be critical. I do wish he would be a little more selective with some of the footage he uses, but I know he's just using canned surplus footage. But he's still, the information's good, and he's got the perfect narrator's voice. I really enjoy watching him. And he's kicked off several other channels. He's got, what is it? Dark Skies, Dark Space, Dark Docks, and man, he's killing it too. I've got Dirty Harry's Colt. Yeah, but Dirty Harry didn't carry a Python. He carried a Smith & Wesson Model 29. I've got a Python, and it's a safe queen. I mean, I love it. Take it out. I did a video on it. You know, got to shoot it about once a year. You know, clean it, put it back. Pretty. But if I'm going to carry a duty gun, I'd probably carry a Smith. I was firing a Model 29 a while back. I actually got some drone footage of me shooting it. It's one of the other Fun with Guns videos, I think. And, you know, you go through a box 44 Magnum, you're about ready to go have a coffee because, yowza. But the Automag, yeah. You know, yeah, Eastwood is a shooter, and he I think those are his guns he uses. But you know, did you know originally Dirty Harry was supposed to carry like a nickel 357? They didn't like the way it looked on camera, I think, so they came up with the idea of the Model 29, the big 44 Magnum. Smith couldn't give those guns away. That movie come out, and then they couldn't make them fast enough. But the Automag, he even pointed out in the movie that you have to cut down 308 cases. I don't think anybody actually. There may be some boutique company that manufactures the ammo for it. But generally you have to cut down 308 cases to make it yourself. But if you're shooting something like an Automag, then you're probably, you know, into reloading and stuff just as a matter of cost. God, what a cannon. I think they just, how was this? AMT made the Automag? Not the AMT, the model company. I think the company changed hands a couple of times. It's a beast. If you've ever held one, it's like, jeez, you know. Another one's like this, a Desert Eagle. And you know, that thing comes in 51, was it 50 Action Express? They actually have a 50 caliber round that can go in that thing. And but the base of the round is small enough to fit in the slide. You have a special barrel and chamber, and I'm kind of like, dude, you need that kind of horsepower. Just get a carbine or shotgun. Yeah, man, that comment made no sense at all. It just pokes a big hole. If you're going after bear or something, but yeah. Well, 30 carbines, if I'm not mistaken, it's pretty ballistically similar to 357 Magnum. A lot of people thought it was really popular. According to what's his name? Oh God, who's that? He was being interviewed by Ian, and he's the big expert on carbines. He said the problem with the carbines, the people said they jammed a lot. That he said the problem was the magazines. He said, you know, that when they used new magazines and when they got shut up, just threw them away and kept using new magazines, they didn't have any trouble. But apparently some of the magazines were really getting really worn out. By the way, trivia, if you're a modeler and you're doing your little infantry figures and one of them's got a carbine, here's a little piece of advice for you. The little bayonet lug apparently didn't come out until the Korean War. So if you're making a World War II figure with an M1 carbine, he should not have a bayonet lug. At least that's my understanding. And you want to see something that will spit empties a long, long, long way. Fire a Russian PPSH-41, the little machine gun with the vented barrel, and a lot of times you see them with drums. See them, and they're still in use today somewhere, I'm sure, because they've been used ever since. But I got to fire one, and they eject straight up, and I was like, it looked like some kind of stop motion of a rocket going into orbit. Also an HK-91, Eckler & Koch 91, the big rifle. Fired one of those. Man, that thing slung, I think we counted that thing slung the brass like 17 yards. But something interesting I did get to shoot a while back was a replica of the Civil War era muzzle loading Confederate rifle with percussion cap. That was interesting. I couldn't hit 100 yards. I couldn't hit the target with it. It's so big, and I wouldn't. Yeah, I just couldn't. I'd have to. If I had been shooting supported, it wouldn't have been a problem. But I was like, I can't hold this thing up. And it's surprisingly light recoil because the black powder, and the rifle's so heavy. And but I think it was 51 caliber, and I think I did a video on that too. Ooh, you know, you're talking about the Marines. Another thing the Marines had, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a little burp gun called the Rising. I think it was the M50, but it was a little low-cost machine gun that I think the Army rejected, but the Marines didn't anything they could get, so they bought them. And the front end looks like a Tommy gun, and the rear end looks like an M1 carbine. It doesn't have the pistol grip on it. And I remember the first time I saw a picture of a Marine in World War II carrying one, I was like, what the heck is that? Now the Setneys, yeah. Those are popular. Oh, you know, I've seen models of things like 6-scale guitars and 1/6 scale firearms and everything. Never built one, but I was wondering, you know, there doesn't seem to be much point in building a model firearm unless unless you have a character to go with it. I mean, I guess, but I'm not. Somebody builds that, great. I'm not knocking it. I was just kind of like, yeah, you know, but if I could have a figure to go with it, that would be great. You know, something to, you know, or a vehicle to put it on or something like that. But you know, rifles, pistols and things like that, they're really difficult to detail and make look good. I've seen some folks do it, but between the wood and the kind of bluing on the barrel, most folks, obviously myself included, I just paint the furniture brown and the metal black. But that's really you know, you need to put some semi-gloss or something at least on the barrel, because, you know, rifle barrels are blued, and even the subdued ones have a little bit of shine on them. Yeah, Grand slings the cases a long way. Of course, you get the M1 ping, you know, 7, 8, ding. But I got a bunch of, I wound up getting a real good deal on a bunch of M1 Garand pre-clipped ammo. I don't have an M1 Garand, but I got it for the Eddystone to get the 30-06, and I've got a bag full of M1 Garand clips, which these are things they used to throw away. People made ashtrays out of them, you know, used them as paperweights. Now they're apparently worth a few bucks because they're not around like they used to be. I can remember the gun shop would have these baskets sitting in the corner that were full of old leather and old ammo pouches, $1 a piece, something like that. Now that you see on eBay, people want $50 for these things. Yeah, exactly. And gun blue is really a hard thing to mimic on a model. And although I'll bet Payne Shepherd could have done it. That guy was fantastic. Oh, by the way, some of the pictures for the Cold War missile builds have been rolling in. Some nice work. So we're gonna have a lot of fun with that. Okay, let's see. It doesn't shock me that we have similar interests. I mean, you know. It's actually not surprising at all. Um, I've been getting a lot of information from Paul down in New Zealand. He's been sending me a lot of information on these visible kits, and I think that plays into what you're asking, why we have the same hobbies. And good night, Larry. Take care, brother. I have a thought on that, and this will kind of be my closing thought, and we'll be shutting down here in a second. Birds of a feather is true, but I think it's because most of us already had an interest in things like aviation, car, machinery. Let's just call it machinery, okay? And in history, the two seem to kind of go hand in hand, and models are just an extension of that. So, and that gets back to when something I talked about before, when Royal Glazer and Lou Glazer being Revell were kind of being hammered by various groups about making war toys. And they look, we got to make what sells. They tried to get into the education end of things, making models that were educational, like Renoir had done with Invisible Man, Invisible Woman, and then other companies made I'm now learning a whole bunch of visible kits that I didn't even know existed. All kinds of insects and mammals, and I haven't found a visible snake yet, but maybe that's one they skipped on, but visible birds, and several companies got into this, and I think they were trying to tap in to the education market, and they, given by the number that made, I'm assuming they had some success, maybe a lot, but the meat and potatoes was still machinery, cars, planes, trucks, tanks, ships, subs, because that's just what most model builders are into. So it sort of makes sense that we already had this similar interest, and then the modeling community was giving us what we wanted. The one exception to that, well, I wouldn't even say it's an exception to that, is of course the movie tie-ins, which are a big part of the business, and the movie tie-ins had Aurora on top of the game for a long time. They were the third largest kit model company in the world, if I'm not mistaken, when change of management took them in another direction. And we all know the story behind that. They wanted to get into games, so yeah, let's leave as the third largest kit model maker in the world, and let's jump in and go head to head with an established company like Milton Bradley. What could go wrong? And oh well. But here we are, and it's kind of funny now. Modeling, we now have access to stuff that 40 years ago modelers would never have dreamed of. Not only some of the kits that are made, but the quality. And when I build like this Renoir kit I'm working on now, I have to remember that these molds were made when it was a guy on a lathe, essentially. I mean, I'm not exactly sure the total, but you get what I mean. I mean, they didn't have computer-operated CNC machines. I still get blown away when I think about the quality of craftsmanship that went into making them. I think I'm more impressed with them making the molds than anything else, because let's make this pattern. We'll carve it out of wood. Okay, magnificent artwork, to be sure. Talent par excellence. Hey, dude, I want you to turn around and make a negative of this out of steel. And wow, I know they made castings and they pantographed and everything. I get it. They definitely had aids. No one's going to Kentucky windage something that specific. Yeah, it looks like we just chisel right here. But I mean, we're getting beyond Michelangelo level stuff. So it still blows me away. And the skill, and to make it worse, all these guys are dealing with this beryllium copper, which at the time they didn't realize was, actually a very dangerous metal to work with. It had a lot of health implications. Yep, Atlantis coming out of the Amoeba kit. Yeah, they are still popping some of the educational kits. I would think with the beer bug that people would be wanting to learn a lot about how the human body works and germs and all that stuff, and they should, because didn't Aurora have a Revell have they did a cell, they did an amoeba, and for some reason I want to say they did a germ or bacteria. That's probably my imagination. 50 rounds of 308. That should be a beer. 50 rounds of 308 beer. What do I want after I've filed 50 rounds of 308? I want a beer. Yeah, Aurora fell in the same trap that Mattel fell into when they got Monogram. And that was they got into a business that wasn't their forte and they didn't and the same thing when Mattel got Monogram, they got rid of their marketing staff and said, "Oh, well, we're in the toy business. We understand. Well, these aren't toys. These are crafts, people." And oh, the Aurora Gladiator kit. Wow, that's one I hadn't thought about in a long time. COVID kit. I heard there's a patent on it. So my wife said that when we get the pictures for the Cold War missile build, she wants to look at them because she wants to pick the winner. So, baby, there's no winner here. It's this is all just us showing each other our work. And she's like, but I want to see which one would be the most. I want to pick the one that would be the most effective against Godzilla. So the Godzilla meter may be determined by her. And I'm kind of like, well, here's the warhead yield. I don't care. This one looks better. Yeah, good times. And I'm actually planning, if I can, to try and do something. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off given time, and there'll be a little video production thing for the Cold War missile build. If you want, not a big deal. If you've got a blue or green big piece of cardboard, and you can put it behind your model, take a shot from the side, take a shot from the rear. Okay, if it has like that. If the model's got green in it, I would say use the blue. If it's got blue, if it doesn't, then green's easy. But also red would work. Just give me just so I don't have to cut the image out. I might be able to do a few things with that just to have a little fun in the video. Not a big deal. Don't worry about it if you don't have it. But I just got a silly idea for a little fun. A clear body to pilot. Interesting. You just gave me an idea. The Gemini, Revell Gemini, comes with a full interior as far as all the tanks and everything, the tankage and everything goes. But when you put the thing together, you can't see any. Of course, it breaks down into 3 pieces. But somebody could vacuum form the exterior shell and cut it and make a visible Gemini. That, because it has such a decent detailed interior, that would actually be a pretty cool project for someone to do. And really, I guess you can do that with any detailed kit. I've got that Japanese thing. It's KI-109 that has that LS made with the visible. It has clear, or you have the option of it gives you option of clear engine nacelles and clear body halves. And what I'm planning to do is put the clear and the solid together. I've had the thing sitting on the shelf forever and just haven't gotten to it. But I want to make a little bit of an interior for it, and I'm not going to hyper detail it, just to sort of show the positions because it's 1/72 scale. But I think that'll be kind of a cool thing. But what I might do is mount it without the wing, so that you can, I can just set it aside and just sort of see the fuselage positions where everything goes. And well, guys, it's pretty much it for tonight. I am going to leave the comment stream up real quick before I go. Let me take a quick look at something here. Okay, is this anything? Okay. I'm just looking at my schedule real quick. We, uh-oh. That ain't good. I should have Saturdays off for October. Oh. I saw a thing on my phone, my schedule, my work schedule. I was like, and it had an alert on it. I'm like, was I supposed to be at work today or something? It's just a hotel change. Okay. It scares me when they do that before I go to work. But it looks like I should have Saturdays off this in October. So, provided nothing gets in the way, maybe we can do a few more live streams this month. And I promise next time I'll have more stuff prepared. Although really this is just more of a gab session. But I like to have something to kick off the conversations. So, all right. One thing I did, I mentioned this before. One thing I did see it when I was at that Gundam USA in Daytona Beach was they had the 144 scale pagodas. And I was like, if I get that, that's just got to go right in front of the Polar Lights Godzilla. I mean, you just cannot not do that. Same thing if you happen to have that Westinghouse nuclear power plant, you got to have a Godzilla to put beside that. Some things are meant to go together. So, guys, that's it for this evening. I want to thank everybody for coming out and having a good time with me. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everybody for all the emails, the information, the goodies that have showed up in the mail, all that stuff. I thank you very, very much. Hope you guys are having a wonderful evening. As always, I'm going to leave the comment stream up for a while so you guys can chat. And I'll just loop the video from the beginning, and you can turn down the volume if you want. But once again, appreciate you coming out to spend some time with me this evening. It does mean a lot. We will see all you guys later. And as always, model on.